Okay, so once again, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. What we'll be discussing today is UX portfolio secrets for transitioning into UX, revealing some secrets for you. Very exciting. So we have invited an awesome guest speaker who is a seasoned UX professional by now and has quite a bit of experience in the field already. We'll share many insights about that he learned along the way and his journey, and answer your questions as well. And we'll introduce our wonderful guest in just a few minutes. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael. I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. We help people who know UX basics and want to transition into UX. Our program is a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects that provides a guaranteed way to become highly marketable and land a UX role. And unlike most traditional bootcamps or career programs, we allow our participants to build real experience, strong real client portfolio, crucial softer skills like UX team collaboration, client and stakeholder management and presentation, and master the UX job search and interviewing necessary to land the UX role. All in a collaborative and fun environment and under the guidance of industry practitioner mentors from top companies. All right, so I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just to give you a bit of a background for credibility purposes. So the company is headquartered in New York City. We have run many virtual cohorts and helped over 160 people get hired into UX roles. And we'll tell you a bit more about our virtual program and also make a special announcement closer to the end of the event. And of course, that part is completely optional for you. All right. So here's some of the companies that the grads are hired by. So we've basically seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition from start to finish. All right, so basically one of our key principles is starting with the end in mind, right? So before diving into things and starting to spend lots of time on learning and doing, it is key to understand what exactly is needed to become that candidate that employers will actually want to hire, and then how you will actually get there. So first of all, there are three main roadblock areas that prevent people from successfully transitioning into the field and landing their first UX roles. First of all, lack of solid hard or soft skills and that they can successfully demonstrate on their resume and their portfolio. Second is a lack of strong portfolio case studies and real experience. And third is basically weak job search assets and poor search as well as interviewing skills. So let's address this quickly one by one. Here's a high-level framework of what is needed that many people like and find quite useful. We use a product analogy in this framework, so you'll understand why soon. Yeah, and by the way, I see someone is talking about not seeing the screen. Yeah, no slides for this, so this is just like a quick talk, so don't worry. No slides. This is going to be relatively brief, but Sinran actually does have the slides for us. So when he will talk about the portfolio topic specifically. All right. Shandani, thanks for clarifying. All right, so let's address these one by one. Again, high-level framework. We use a product analogy in this framework, so you'll understand why soon. First of all, you want to have strong hard skills, right? This is the most kind of foundational one. Knowledge and hands-on practice with the key phases of the UX process and ability to produce the deliverables. Next is softer skills, right? Soft skills like hands-on practice and experience with those soft skills in a UX setting that can be included on resume, portfolio, and demonstrated interviews, such as team collaboration, client management, presentation, and communication that you can actually show on your resume and portfolio. And this can sometimes be even more important than hard skills and is listed on almost any job description. Next area is case studies. So comprehensive, sizable UX projects. And unlike in visual design, for example, effective UX case studies are much longer and more comprehensive. So the focus is on quality and not on and then the process, not on quantity of those. You typically need at least 3 sizable case studies with 2 real clients, ideally, right? So that's not always a must, right? But it will basically save you a lot of time in the long run while job searching. Next area is real experience. And this requirement is also listed on almost any job description, even entry-level ones. And this is usually the most important criteria for many employers. So here are some case study and real experience tips, because this is the area that we get the most questions on usually, and people get stuck in the most, and we also specialize in our program as well. So some tips related to building real experience and case studies to ensure that the real work of projects that you do actually turn into strong and effective UX case studies and valuable work experience. So not just any UX project, not just any case study, not just some work experience, but valuable and effective. So first of all, you want to have more unique and not cookie cutter projects included in hundreds of other people's portfolios. Next, ideally, you want to have engaged and collaborative clients interested in and committed to the project. So you actually have a good experience and strong case studies. Next is you want to have an opportunity to regularly interact and collaborate with the clients and key stakeholders. Ideally, you want to have experience with a digital product, right? So not just information site, ideally, but something like a mobile app or a web app or some type of software that is more interactive. Next is ideally you want to have a team that you work with on those case studies, on those projects, and because that is always crucial to demonstrate to employers. You want to have a mentor, right? And basically, if possible, right? And ensure that will help ensure that you do not waste time while doing those projects to build in that experience and get it done much more efficiently. You want to plan, structure, and scope the project with the client in advance to ensure you move in the right direction and the project is sizable, but you actually get it done in a couple of months, maybe a little longer, and it does not drag on forever. Like we've seen this many, many times when people try to do like volunteer projects, and that just drags on and on and on, right? You want to do some volunteering maybe, right? But you don't want to do that for too long because your ultimate goal is like landing an actual paid job. And this will help ensure that you gain valuable experience again in a timely manner and have strong portfolio case studies. When you work with clients, you want to ensure that they have implementation, what we call implementation intent, right? So ideally you have access to the executive team or like key decision makers in that startup or company, or, you know, if it's like a small business or something like that, and ensure they really want to get this done. So it's not just something like nice to have, yeah, just do whatever, but something they really want to get done. They have like skin in the game and really want it, right? Because then you're much more likely to be able to showcase that in your portfolio and specifically to demonstrate the impact and the result, which is very important. So, and again, you definitely want to ensure that you can showcase the case studies in your portfolio before you do any like experience building or volunteering or etc. So you don't spend many months, especially if it's volunteering type of work, and then realize, oh, I cannot show any of this, right? So that'd be very useful. And ideally, you also want to involve a developer earlier on, right? So it doesn't have to be right from the beginning, but basically as soon as possible, you want to get that some of that developer collaboration experience, right? Because employers ask about it all the time when you will be interviewing, right? So that's very important too. So essentially hard skills, soft skills, case studies, and experience is like a product or a service that you're building and will be offering to employers. Next, you want to create the search assets, as we call them, to showcase your product. So that involves an effective UX portfolio. You want to receive plenty of feedback from UX industry professionals and iterate many times. You want to have a strong UX resume and online presence like LinkedIn, etc., with that professional UX experience, and then also iterate several times based on receiving plenty of feedback from UX industry practitioners. And also, essentially, you need to package all your skills and experience effectively and position yourself as a candidate that employers really want to hire. So basically, someone who they can see can basically hit the ground running and help them solve some of their problems. The other area is understanding and mastering effective search strategies and the UX-specific interviewing process. So you want to build relationships with many professional contacts in the UX space. You want to get lots of practice and experience with the UX interviewing process by conducting mock interviews and special exercises, whiteboarding challenges, portfolio presentations, etc. And this will help ensure that, first of all, you start getting interview invites, and second, that you do not waste those opportunities, but can effectively progress to next rounds and get job offers. We refer to job search assets, search itself, and interviewing. So these last few pillars that we covered as marketing and sales of that product that you built. A couple of key mistakes that we see. One is just not building a product that is strong enough, right? And then you can market all you want, but it's just not going to be very effective, right? You're just going to get much more rejection and frustration than is really necessary, which can get quite frustrating, right? And basically compromises the whole transition altogether. We've seen that happen as well. So you don't want to like have too much of that. The second part is not learning the science behind marketing and sales part, not preparing, not practicing enough in that area. And that means basically, even if you have a decent product, right? Your skills and experience, everything is wonderful. If you don't master marketing and sales, right, the career prep part, then you can still get stuck in that phase for months or even years. So we have seen those cases as well. All right, so this is just a very quick high-level intro in terms of just the big picture model of what is needed for this transition, right? Now, so let's introduce our guest and jump into the specifics of UX portfolio secrets, right? So one of those key pillars of those job search assets that we just discussed. So Sinram, would love to bring you back on here. And so let's get to this most fun part, introduce our awesome guest. And so then Sinran will do a talk. And after that, we'll jump into the interview. So once again, Sinran, great to have you here. Thanks again for joining us. Really excited to have this discussion with you, because I know you really dug in deep into this whole topic, and you even wrote a few books about this. And I know you, because I've known you for quite some time. I know you're very detailed, and so you really understood this topic in depth. So I'm really excited for you to go over this for the audience. So would you like to briefly introduce yourself and to our audience?
Sure. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yep.
Okay. That's good. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Xinran Ma. I'm based in New York City, working as a senior product designer at Redfin, which is a real estate technology company. So my career started as an architect. I started architecture in a college. I got both my bachelor and master degree in architecture. And then I started my architecture career working in architecture firms for some years, and then I made a career switch. To me, it's more like a transition, or rather than transition, it's more of a extension of my architecture career, as there are a lot of similarities and overlaps. And I saw there's one attendee today who's also an architect. So hi there, former architect. Yeah, and I started working at different companies from in product design or in UX design, from very small startups all the way to a big corporation, from a small design team of 2 designers, all the way to the big design team of over 40 designers. And for those of you who know me, I'm also very passionate about sharing the lessons I learned along the way. So I wrote 3 books, essentially sharing the hard lessons that I've learned. And I've also having coffee chats with hundreds of designers over the past like five years. So there are some perspectives I love to share with other people. So the books capture some of them. I'm also very passionate about the intersection between AI and UX. I've regularly given talks at different institutions and also writing this newsletter every week about UX and AI. All right, that's a brief introduction for me, Michael.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, I know Zinran is really good at, should follow him on LinkedIn, Connect. He is really into AI, and I think that's a huge, very interesting topic. That's, I mean, I know it's a different topic, but he is really good at that stuff, really mastered that as well. All right, so Sinram, feel free to take it away. I know you have a few slides you want to cover, and then after that, we'll jump into the discussion.
All right, let me share my screen. Here's my screen, Michael.
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, so I try to make the talk as short as possible. I know the Q&A session is always the meaty part, and I would love to spare more time for that session. So I did prepare a presentation. It's mainly about something I wanted to share around portfolio, since the topic today is around portfolio. So this is a basic structure today. And I've already introduced some of myself. I used to be an architect. I transitioned into a product designer. I'm based in New York. Published 3 books on UX and product design. I've been also writing this AI newsletter every week, sharing practical tips about leveraging AI in UX design and product design. I've also been teaching the course via Maven called AI for Product Designers, and now I already finished the first cohort, so it's going to be the second cohort. I'm also regularly speaking at different institutions, including UXPA, Microsoft New York, and different universities for different kinds of workshops over the year. So here comes to the question that we have today, which is, are there any secrets to successful portfolios? And when I saw this title and when I heard of this topic, I know it's a very tricky thing to talk about. The reason is that there's just so many tips around there about UX portfolio. So this is what I did through Google, and there's a long list of items that shared. And I've personally read many of the tips, tactics myself as well. And I realized that everything that needs to be said has already pretty much been said. So when we're talking about UX portfolio secrets, are there even secrets in the first place? I still believe I still think that I still believe so. Yeah, there are some things that people talk about. To me, may not be as important as I think. And I believe this is similar with other things as well, that when people are saying something, you may have a different perspective. On my end, I agree with a lot of things that people share about, but also there are certain perspectives I don't think are emphasized enough. So if that is called portfolio secrets, like in my humble opinion, there are some things that I would like to share. So using today's opportunity, not to share like everything, but only sharing the things that I believe has a meaningful impact and has not been emphasized enough. First of all, I wanted to give a definition to portfolio. For today, I would like to narrowly focus on the portfolio site. Oftentimes, people can give a ambiguous or broader meaning to the term portfolio, right? Sometimes if people mix with personal branding, people mixed with the presentation during the interview. Those are very important pieces. But for today, I like to narrow down the scope into the portfolio website. And yes, naturally, the work is part of the website as well, right? So I was talking about this perspective. In terms of storytelling, how do you present your work at interviews? Super important topic, but it may not be the focus for today. All right, I'll start with the work. The work itself is more about the quality of the project. So if you were to see a building, I like to frame that as the foundation of a building, similar with the 2 columns that you see here. If the project itself is of high quality, then it had a solid, stable foundation. If the project itself has some intrinsic flaws, maybe it's like too simple, or it's like too conceptual, or too odd, then no matter how much time, effort you put into create a fantastic, fabulous, visually pleasing website, it may not hold long or well enough for the whole building. So what kind of project has this intrinsic solid foundation? I would say a project with constraints, certain level of complexity, and impact. Similar with what Michael mentioned about we give them some sort of like real world aspects. When we talk about the real projects, what is real world projects? It does not have to have a client per se. I know it's always good to have a client, but it doesn't really have to always have a client component. I think by saying the client or real world, what matters the most is about the constraints, is about the user constraints, the technical constraints, those kind of constraints. And also, if you have constraints with stakeholders, or you have to negotiate this design idea with another designer, that kind of people aspect, it is also part of a constraint. And certain level of complexity. If something is too simple, like you're like let's say designing a button with a like nice looking CTA button, it's good, you can do it very well, but it's just lack of enough complexity as a project. But that said, for portfolios alone, given today's topic, I would say the first impression matters more. Why? Because there's not a lot of time people can actually consume the portfolio at the portfolio screening stage. Judgment can be made within 15 seconds, or maybe even 10 seconds. So this is a sort of a controversial opinion here, but I think to me, the main function of your portfolio is not really about sharing all the things about your portfolio or, just make it as comprehensive as possible. To me, the main function of portfolio is to get you to the second stage of the interview process. So let's say if the people land on your portfolio, you left a great impression, and they would call you to get to the next round of interview where you can share more details of your design reasonings, your design process, or your design philosophy. That's already a like basically like I know that people would still look at a portfolio after the second stage or the third stage, but to me the main function is get to this interview stage because it's super critical for you to have the opportunity to talk about your project in depth. So that's why portfolio website still matters, but not matters as much as you think. It is important to leave a strong first impression. So how to make a good first impression of your work? And I know it can be a lot of things. And to me, the work itself, the only one thing I want to talk about today is the quality of the user interface. It's paramount. It's super important. So what does high quality user interface mean? There are four bullet points listed here. Number one, it looks familiar. What do I mean by look familiar? Familiar means it looks like something or interface or UI that the hiring manager have seen before elsewhere. And you may wonder, this contradicts to what people would think, right? Because we want it to be creative. Why would we want it to look familiar? When I was an architect, I want to design a concept that very different from other people's concept, right? The thing is that if you look at user interface, the digital design, let's say apps or websites, there are similarities, and there are similarities for a reason. It's not innovating for the sake of innovating, but it's more about the constraints behind it. For example, they are using the same or the more more, let's say, a standard design system within the company, or they use a popular design system developed by other companies, right? So there are some constraints, and things are designed that way for a reason. So oftentimes I suggested not to reinvent the wheel for some of the UI components. And I think that's why if you look at your phone, if you look through all the apps, that could be helpful. Why things are designed that way? Why my design is different from their design? Am I just innovating for the sake of innovating? Or should I, is there some principles or reasons that they design certain interactive components the way they design? So just some thoughts here, because I noticed many portfolios that have very different, dramatically different UI or UI elements that I can call out to say that she or he does not have a lot of experience in product design. All right. So I think that's a point I wanted to make. And for the time's sake, I'll probably accelerate a little bit to the other points. I know there are so many things to say, but I also wanted to leave enough time for Q&A. Consistent styling, good accessibility, those are all best practice for user interface. So you don't want a style to be dramatically different from from page to page. You want to keep it as consistent as possible. Let's say if you have a CTA button designed that way, chances are you may reuse it on the other screen, unless you have a reason not to. Let's say maybe there are two CTAs, want to change the styling. Otherwise, try to keep things as consistent as possible. Good accessibility. I noticed there are a lot of accessibility issues for beginners portfolio, like for example, gray text on gray background, which is hard to read. So those are some red flags that you can try to avoid to give people the good first impression. High resolution, of course, if you have images in a portfolio, try to make it as high resolution as possible. For impact, a project with impact or storytelling, those are all important things. However, again, if we only look at the portfolio website, arguably, people wouldn't read it line by line. So I think the impression is important, but also I don't want it to stress too much on the storytelling part for portfolio website. It is still important, but storytelling can really shine in your portfolio presentation interview stage, where you actually get to share a presentation slide deck with the hiring manager one-on-one. I think that's where storytelling can really shine. So I'm just going to skip through that, and feel free to ask me any questions for clarification. The portfolio website, still using this image, the portfolio website is like the facade detail on the upper part, sort of like a icing on the cake, or what people get to look at every day. So there are some tips here. The first one is polish the homepage, particularly the top section. As I mentioned, the first impression is important. If you were a hiring manager, when you land on a portfolio website, the first thing you get to see is the top section of the homepage. That is very important. So this is Sean's portfolio as an example. When people land on this homepage, they get to see this big text with some nice styled cards, and it gives people a great impression. It's not very simple, just like text, but there are very well-crafted typography can be seen through those texts. Second point, leading the case study page with a glimpse of compelling design. So imagine after people land on the homepage, what would they do next? Most of the time, they would click on one of the case study. So that page is called, I call it case study page. This is an example of Jazz portfolio. As you can see, there is an image on the top. Well, to be more specifically, is user interface or user UI design. The reason it is important is because it captures people's attention immediately, as opposed to showing people plain text at the top. And visuals always, if you have strong visuals, it's always good to show them up front to get people's attention. Improve the text image balance. This is a very subtle thing, but I wanted to call out. If you notice the portfolios, chances are there is text, and there are images. The balance, the visual balance is very important. So this is Jazz portfolio. As you can see, she breaks it into chunks. Text, image, text, image. So it's very easy to digest as opposed to a long chunk of text without showing any image. Number 4, show large images if you can. The reason I put it if you can is because I noticed a lot of time. First of all, it's great to show large, high resolution, high quality UI if you can. It is very powerful. It's probably one of the most powerful things you can do for your portfolio, but only if you can. For example, Iris portfolio, he basically plays a large, high resolution, high quality UI with certain complexity with great visual hierarchy. It can be a very powerful thing to show in your portfolio. However, if you realize you cannot scale an image up and place it at the front and the center as a big image, chances are you need some improvements on the UI. Maybe the requirements is too simple. Maybe you don't have a lot of constraints. Whatever reason that is, you need to make it fit or shine if you choose to scale it up. Otherwise, it's a good time to revisit your design. Number 5, establish a good typographic hierarchy. A simple thing, but it can be powerful. You notice this headline and the body text, there's a contrast there, right? So it gives people a clear read of the hierarchy of this paragraph. A small detail, but can make a big impact. Make it more readable. A common trick here is to break things into 2-column layout. Why? Because I noticed many people have portfolios with long line of text, which is very hard to read. So if you read a magazine or newspaper, you probably realize that things are often broken into 2 columns in order to shrink the total length of line of text in order to make it easier to read. So the 2-column, you can even leave the left column to be blank if you want. Number 7, not all case studies receive the same level of attention, which means that you should focus more on the first case study of your portfolio, because oftentimes people even don't have the time to get to your second or third case study. So choose your time and effort wisely. You should be very specific, very intentional about showing your best work as the first project. Number 8, the design exploration is more effective than the design process. So this is a large topic. We don't have the time to go over here, but all I wanted to say is that you don't have to show the process for the sake of showing process. You can only include the highlight moments of the whole process, and that can already leave a stronger impression than just blindly talk about everything. Keep the navigation simple and effective. This is a very typical layout of a portfolio. It is common or popular for a reason, because it is easy to navigate. And navigation, the ease of navigation, is the interaction design 101 item that hiring manager wanted to see as well. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel to innovate at the expense of the ease of navigation. Number 10, adding some personality. It's always a good thing to stand out given this market. All right. So to summarize, I also published 3 books. The first one is about the overall strategies. The second one, which is I'm really into it, it's about how to present your work and prepare for your case study strategically. So it's about interview presentation, but it's all about the strategy planning behind it. And then the third book, it's about something that I just share about the portfolios and with some actual resources. They are available on Gumroad and Amazon. You can always take a look. And there are other resources that I share on Gumroad as well. I'm also having this second cohort of Maven course called AI for Product Designers, which is starting in a couple of weeks. Right now is the early bird period, and it's going to expire in 3 days. If you are really interested in the course, I definitely recommend you to check it out, how to leverage AI into the practical product design or UX design practice. And I know if you face any financial difficulties, I will try my best to accommodate. Feel free to email me. And I was there, so I've been there. I know, sometimes you're really interested in something but couldn't afford it, but we can chat offline. Okay, happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Sinran. Awesome. That was awesome. That is great. Yeah, and I also wanted to second, highly recommend any work that Sinran puts out. Again, as I said, he's very detailed and has a lot of perfectionist tendencies. So I'm sure the work is amazing. So if you guys are interested in AI plus UX, definitely check it out. Maybe Sinran, feel free to put like a link if you haven't done so in the chat as well, so that people know where to go. Don't go there yet because we still have the majority of the event, the bigger part of the event ahead of us, right? So let's jump into the interview. So Sinran, feel free to unshare the slides for now, and we'll just jump into the interview. And then we can share that again and maybe put it. Yeah, I think you already did. I think you just shared it in the panelist chat. So make sure it's in, you put it in in everyone chat as well, so that
Gotcha.
our wonderful audience can actually see that too. All right. So let's jump into the discussion. So again, just a quick reminder, if you have a question, please use the Q&A tab. I already see quite a few questions there, which is amazing. Keep that up. Also review others' questions and upvote the ones that you're interested in. This way we know which questions everyone is most interested in. All right, so make sure you guys do that, and we'll try to address as many as possible. Try to address like all of them. And also just a reminder, we'll make a special announcement about the program that we're running closer to the end of the event as well, and also share the career transition roadmap summary handout. So stick around if you'd like to get that as well. All right, so Sinran, I know you covered quite a bit of stuff, and I ask you to not go for an hour, but I know you have lots of amazing information, so I have lots of questions for you. If you could have 3 more secrets, maybe, would you add any additional key portfolio secrets to what you mentioned?
There are a lot of secrets to share, but
just three.
For portfolio side or portfolio specifically, I can readdress some because I think there are definitely more to share about case study storytelling in the interviews. But for portfolio, okay, I'll share something maybe different from what I just shared. Number 1 is that if you really have to rely on your portfolio to get a job, then probably it's a little bit late because you have to depend on the hiring managers to go through all kinds of portfolio sites, which are most of which are great, to choose you to the next round of interviews. I think what I try to say is that even during the process of you building the portfolio, it's a good time for you to ask for feedback from seasoned designers and to really improve it. Because you not only can improve your portfolio, you can also meet some new people or other designers along the way, so that when the chance comes, there's opportunity, they can think of you with a good portfolio rather than just blindly select your portfolio out of a huge pool of portfolio. So an ideal scenario would be someone, let's say, is an hiring manager. They proactively reach out to you even without looking at your portfolio because they have already know your work and they already trust you. So this is I would say the first secret, which are probably different from the things that I just mentioned about earlier. The second one I already mentioned is about the UI. And I know sometimes people are not really buying into this because UX or product design is not just about UI. Like everyone wanted to stress that. However, things are different from 7 or 8 years ago, the market and the landscape. There are so many great crafting portfolios that are very different from, let's say, 7 or 8 years ago. So the same portfolio 7 years ago may be very hard to find a job today because the bar has been raised higher and higher. So that's why when everyone has a good looking websites, a main differentiator here is the user interface. You don't have to be the best in the world, but it has to have high quality. And the high quality, what I mean is not just about visually pleasing user interface design, it's also about the feasibility. Like what I mentioned is, why does it look different from the daily apps or websites? Why they look different? And do you have a reason behind it? I think those are the things that I try to stress, is about the maturity of your interface design. So that's the second point. The third point is about I think the overall impression when people only have 10 to 15 seconds to read your portfolio. It's probably a stretch. Usually people have longer time than that, but I do believe that they can already make a call within only 15 seconds of looking at a portfolio. So if people only have 15 seconds to look at a portfolio with an impression, then you can make a judgment of where you wanted to spend more time on. Do you want to spend more time on the nuanced details of the story? That may not be the case because even they don't have time to read through those kind of things. So that's why the overall impression, the visuals, the visual balance, visual hierarchy, the overall structure makes it look like that you have more things to talk about, to raise this kind of curiosity so that they can call you for the next round of interview. You don't have to disclose everything. You only disclose the best of your work. And sure, you can always add some storytelling components if you want. But again, that's the icing of the cake. So that's it, Michael.
All right, awesome. So How about also maybe in addition to what you mentioned, what do you think is the top 1 to 3 portfolio mistakes that people make? And by the way, we can also touch on, it doesn't have to be just about portfolio side. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the case studies. I know we can like get deep into case studies as well, but we'll cover that a little bit as well. What do you think are the top 1 to 3 mistakes that people make?
I can always start with portfolio, and we can switch topics to something related to case study storytelling. For the portfolio mistake, I think the first mistake I've seen often is that the visual. Okay, so again, the design quality of the user interface is not there yet, and I know to me it's easier to do other things. Personal branding, resume, make your website looks nice. I think those things are easier to do. But as an experienced designer or as experienced hiring managers, they can very quickly tell the maturity or the experience that you have as a designer when they look at the UI that you designed. It's simple like that. And I know there are a lot of people like, let's say, I can just copy designs from other apps. You can do that too. It won't how to say, like, it won't help you too far, because eventually you have a wonderful website with excellent quality user interface design. We'll get to the next stage of interview. You're probably gonna fail because you have not a lot to say. But that's a different story, right? At least if we were to focus on portfolio, then it may get you to the next stage. So that's why I think the mistake I want to stress here is that spending a lot of time focusing other areas, but without stressing to polish the user interface design. And there's a lot of knowledge, nuanced knowledge around this area alone. So that's what I want to call out. The second thing I wanted to call out is that sometimes the awareness as a component, I would say, is the second mistake, is that awareness component is that you've been working on a portfolio design for a long time, but you're not getting the good feedback from the right people. So you're not aware of that enough, where you need to improve. And sometimes it can get you into this comfort zone of, I'm spending too much time on this design or on this portfolio. I just don't want it to change much. And this is a common pitfall that I see. And it makes sense because you've been working a lot of time on this design. You've been building this portfolio website for a long time. You don't want it to change a lot to it. That's why I often recommend it to keep your portfolio as simple as possible from a structure perspective. Because once you add a lot of complexity, text, story to that, it's hard to go back because you invested too much time in it. It's hard for you to make a big step back and revisit things. Number 3, portfolio mistake, I think is some very easy, simple things that don't look as professional. For example, on the homepage, you don't show, or there's nowhere that you show your email address. So how would people contact you? Or you don't have this resume link ready on your portfolio website, so people don't know where to find your resume. Or there may be some navigation issues on your website that they don't know how to easily get from one page to another page. Or your portfolio website URL have a weird name like abcdefg.wix.com, so it doesn't look as professional. Michael.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so I'm going to ask you another question, and then I also want to take a quick question from our Q&A as well. Who should you be designing your portfolio for?
For so like philosophical question.
Well, we don't have to go too deep. Just like what's what's the user? What's the key user you think, or key users? Who are they?
The user is the hiring manager, or the users are the hiring manager and the key decision maker. So oftentimes are the designers. So I would say hiring manager and designers on the team, they are the key users of your portfolio. There are some other decision makers as well. Oftentimes they are the cross-functional partner, such as the product manager who you'll be working on, and the software engineer manager who you'll be working with. However, they don't have that much say in the portfolio itself. It's more about the behavioral question round that they can have different opinions.
Yeah, it's a good point because yeah, we just see like a lot of people make that mistake. It's basically just not thinking about that actual end user as much, right? Because your portfolio is basically an example of your basically project in itself, right? So it's very important to keep that user in mind and design it for them, not just for yourself, like in your displaying your work, etc., but with them in mind. So Chandani has a question in the Q&A tab here. So let's take the first part for now. How to increase the chance of cracking your UX job, or getting your UX job if one does not have too many case studies or experiences to show?
Yeah. I want to double check the question. You mean so she mentioned there are not many case studies to show, or there's not a lot of experience to show?
Yeah, I think what she means is not basically doesn't have a lot of case studies or experiences
Okay.
and what to do, get more. I mean, I can start and you could maybe add it at like more in-depth insights here. I would just say like get more case studies and more experience, right? That was I know it sounds obvious, but that's also a mistake that a lot of people make with this, right? Basically, they just have like one or two case studies and they just apply and apply and apply and apply. And it's like marketing a product that is not that strong yet, right? It's going to get you much more rejection and frustrations. So our recommendations usually get to like 3 is usually the magic number. Now, there are some exceptions, of course, and of course, not every case study is equal, right? It's one thing to have like a tiny hackathon case study versus something you work on for 6 months or something like that. But yeah, basically ensure that you have those 3 case studies and ensure that you have a couple of them, ideally with real companies. That's what of course, we're biased, but we've seen lots of data, lots of people go through this. What we usually recommend that lasts for a couple of months each or so. So they look good in your case study, plus they look good on your LinkedIn resume as well. So it's not like something very short. Dinner, I know you have a lot of insight here too.
Right. For the number of case studies, you don't have to have that many. But as Michael said, there are 3 is a good number. And out of the 3, the first one, or there got to be a very good one out of the 3, which you will be presenting that very often. And oftentimes, to be honest, during interview rounds, you have a chance that you don't even get to present your second case study. There probably 80% of the time, or maybe even more, that you only get to present one case study. So that is super important. And that case study is good to have a balance of different things. It's good to have some sort of user constraint, that you get to talk with or at least have some user insights. It's good to have some sort of technical constraints meaning that, it's just not just build a blue sky project. There are some technical challenges that you have to design within that constraint. And it's good to have some sort of business constraint as well, that there is some sort of business or success metric that you wanted to hit. And oftentimes you cannot get three kinds of constraints all in one project, but you try to make it more well-rounded so that you can get to present that work in the interview without knowing what to respond to it. So that's a good rule of thumb. For the second and third project, for the second one is definitely less important, but still you can show something really well. It doesn't have to be as broad as the first project, but you can show something that you can do it very specifically very well. And the benefit of that is that you don't have to show 3 big projects, but without enough substance of every single one. You strategically focus the most of its time and energy on this big project for presentation. So that the second one, it's more like it complements to the first project, that you solve a specific challenge really well, so you can channel your energy to make that part really well. For the third project, chances are you don't even get to present that project in the interview, so that you have some flexibility here around how you wanted to showcase on your portfolio website, knowing the fact that you probably don't even need to present it in the interview. So just make it as professional or has something to show. So hope that can ease your burden a little bit.
Yeah, I think these are great points. My additional concern would be basically it's important to, of course, to think about the hiring manager, but make sure you think about the gatekeepers as well, right? Because in some cases, basically what happens is maybe you have amazing one case study and you're ready, but you just might not pass the initial gatekeeper, like a recruiter, internal or external, et cetera, who will just be doing like checking off check marks, right? 3 case studies, real experience, blah, blah, blah. So that's important to address that as well. So they just don't throw you in a different pile, so you never even get to present anything. Right, so that would be just my concern. That's why we also recommend kind of ensuring that you, even before you get into the depth of presenting going over everything, making sure that you just look good and meet a lot of those check marks for the recruiters, for like the initial gatekeepers. All right, I think Celine had a clarification also, Simran, based on what you mentioned earlier. She's asking, what did you mean before when you said we shouldn't be relying on our portfolio? Not sure if I misheard or misunderstood.
Yeah, sure. Not solely relying on the portfolio to stand out. So in other words, I was referring to how to say. I was alluding to some sort of familiarity between the hiring manager and you. So for example, let's say if the hiring manager know you in person, or the hiring manager have a mutual connection with you, knowing that you have some proven result in the past, or knowing that you are someone who is actually reliable and willing to learn, it's always better than you solely relying on your portfolio to be picked up among a big pool of portfolios. So I think what I'm trying to get is trying to get this kind of additional competitive advantage aside from your portfolio. It can be referral, it can be a connection, or it can be a nice word from your previous client. Those are all can be helpful.
Yeah, and I see a comment from Shahira here. So networking trumps a really good portfolio. I don't think it trumps it. I think it goes together, right? It's basically you want to build your whole picture here, right? So networking is obviously huge, right? As Zinran just pointed out, and I usually like to call it relationship building, because I'm not really excited about like networking, like when it's like superficial, but more about meeting people and getting to know them and seeing how you can help them, how they can help you potentially. So something deeper and more meaningful. So if you look at it that way, if you're not a fan of networking, you might enjoy it more. Yeah, I think both are important. So Sinran, what is, if we talk about the target user again a little bit, could you maybe talk a little bit more, and what do you think those needs of that target user are for your portfolio, and how do you identify those needs?
Sorry, Michael, just to guys sidetrack a little bit, because I saw,
Reading the chat instead of
yeah,
listening.
yeah, I saw your follow-up question about networking trumps a really good portfolio. I'm against this. Now I'm trying to say is that if you have good work, the good work will speak for itself. But the thing is, there are a lot of good portfolios out there. It's not that you have a good portfolio, you can already stand out. There are many of them out there. So I'm trying to address this kind of additional competitive advantage. And it doesn't really have to be networking. You can be just sharing stuff on LinkedIn over a period of time, showing that you wanted to learn new things, and people remember you, right? You don't have to network with that person, but you remember that person. I think that's already something that can be a benefit. So, Michael, sorry about sidetrack
No,
this.
no worries, no worries.
Yeah.
No, these are great points, because yeah, I don't think it has to one has to compete with another. It's like just different piece of the puzzle, right? It's like initially you network and make connections, right? And once you get there, if your portfolio is not great, that whole networking might not help, right?
Totally.
Or the other way around. If your portfolio is amazing, but you like never meet anyone, right? Even if your portfolio is great, it might be much harder for it to like get anywhere and be seen by anyone when you're not referred. That's why we always talk about, like in most of our events and our program as well, about like networking and basically building relationships, and recommending this book all the time that I'm not affiliated with in any way, at least not yet, called 2-Hour Job Search, Steve Dalton. It's basically about informational interviews and networking and how you can do that effectively. It's a how-to book, very to the point, clear, process-oriented, not just superficial fluff, but like the actual system for reaching out to people and not sounding needy, but instead building relationships with them. And I see Mika already put it in the chat. So yeah, Zinran, what I wanted to ask you is, do you want to expand just briefly a little bit? I know we don't have lots of time, so we'll try to get through as many questions as possible without going into too much depth on each one. But what I want to ask you also is, do you want to talk a little bit more about those needs of that target portfolio user, and how do you actually identify those needs? Just
Yeah,
briefly.
sure. It is a very critical thing around this recruiting process, because if you know the need of the hiring manager well, you already tackle a very big challenge, because oftentimes we don't know the need from the hiring manager at all. There is no information. That's why if you can get some insider information around what the hiring manager is looking for, you already can get this competitive advantage. For example, if you know from the insider, I did that, people did that to me in the past as well. It's simply about, hey, I'm gonna have an interview coming up, can I learn more about your team? Things of that nature. And what they asked me was more like a casual coffee chat / interview about, well, what are they looking for in this role? And sometimes depending on if there's no confidential information, if it's all public, then I can say that, it's about a team who's working on this kind of, B2B projects. So they're looking for someone who can fill up the role of a designer who left 3 months ago. They want to backfill that role, so that they are looking for a candidate who has similar skill sets with that person. that is the hiring manager's need. If you can get that information, it's going to be very helpful. The thing is that oftentimes you don't even get to know this kind of information, so you have to speculate. You can speculate from the job post, right? Maybe there are some hints around what kind of skill sets that they're looking for. You can also speculate from the hiring manager's profile, see what are their backgrounds, what their backgrounds are. Are they coming from a visual design background? What do their work look like? It's kind of like focusing on the you know visual design, or do they have a strong consumer facing experience, that kind of thing. So you try to speculate what kind of uh, style that they might have, that you can reframe your presentation around it. Note that I'm not talking about portfolio website, because I'm against you changing your portfolio just for a single company. It's good that you always keep it as the same portfolio, but you can always change how you present things in the interviews. So it's different, right? You don't have to tailor your portfolio every time to a different company. So I think that's what I wanted to say, is basically you get different kind of information to gauge their needs.
Yeah, that's makes sense. And I see that so Celine kind of had a related question that I see quite a few upvotes for. The most popular question, Celine, congrats. And by the way, a reminder for everyone, keep upvoting and reviewing everyone's questions. That's way we know what you guys are more interested in. Okay, the most popular questions. Oh, I see that. A little congrats thing. Awesome. So what Celine is asking, to your point about portfolio interview deck, how should the case studies in the portfolio side compare to the interview deck? And I know this is a huge topic that we could easily have like a whole 3-hour workshop on, but so we'll have to be really to the point and answer it just high level. But basically, how should the case studies in the portfolio side compare to the interview deck? I imagine that the interview deck will be more detailed with metrics and stuff. Recruiters do not spend a lot of time on a portfolio site, so I'm trying to decide what I should really show on my site without sacrificing too much important info, but also not overwhelming the viewer.
Yeah, great question. Try to keep it as short as possible, because it's a topic that I'm really passionate.
It's a whole topic, right? We could do an entire event on that.
Yeah. In a nutshell, you try to find the overlaps. And the overlap is something that you can focus most of the time on. So in other words, you spend a lot of time on the overlap of those two things, portfolio website and your future presentation slide deck. And what is that overlap? That overlap is the final design and the important design explorations of the project. So in other words, if you have a very polished final design, very, very, very nice design explorations, like different high fidelity designs of different ideas, those are the overlaps. So the time that you spend on those kind of stuff are not wasted. You can throw it on your portfolio website and looks very good. You can also throw them on your presentation slide deck. It will be also very useful. Regarding the other things on your portfolio website, different kind of like information, right? So my strategy has always been try to focus on the deck first to have a basic idea of what you wanted to say, because that is the hard part. If you figure that part out, the portfolio website becomes very easy, because you can simply copy paste things from your slide deck to your portfolio website. Why I'm saying so? Because the slide deck, you're only going to have this kind of 20 pages or 30 pages. There is a constraint of space because our computer screen is like this big. You cannot really fit as much information as you want. But for portfolio website, it can take you forever. You can spend like 6 months, 12 months building, deleting, adding things to a portfolio. It's a never-ended road. So that's why I try to encourage you to hyper focus on the story you want to tell, and then build up your portfolio from there. Just personal opinion.
Awesome. Thank you, Sinran. And Celine, regarding your second question, so I'm just going to briefly touch on this, and then we can come back to it if we have time later, because we have a whole event that we did on that topic, right? So you were asking, what are your recommendations for breaking into bigger companies? Joe posted from companies like Google, Amazon, et cetera. I have hundreds of applicants. For reference, I have 2 years of experience working at a small agency, but it's difficult to compete with more qualified candidates who have more years of experience. So I know this is not exactly about the portfolio. We want to focus on portfolios, but here's what I wanted to mention. So we did an event, I'm not sure if you attended that or not, with Jared Spool. So we had him on, and he did a talk about what hiring managers look for in early career candidates. So maybe Mika could find and post the link in the chat, and you guys, or you, Celine, specifically, could take a look later. Basically talks about what they're looking for, the methods, like how the market is more challenging right now because like during the pandemic, everything like opened up and everyone is applying everywhere, right? So there are more opportunities, but also more competition, right? It's kind of going from like offline to online, right? So it's more opportunities, but also more competition. And then we can come back to this as well, because I want to focus this more on portfolios for now. So Mohammed is also asking, do you have to update, do I have to update my portfolio after each project, or what is the reasonable duration, and does rely on powerful projects that cover a wide range of businesses and technologies enough, or do the recruiters look for the duration also? And just to start taking that, duration is, if I understand you correctly, Mohammed, feel free to add. Duration of case studies and projects, that's, I mean, that's also important, right? Because if you have 3 case studies that you did for 1 week each, right? It's not going to be sufficient, and it's not going to be looking great on your resume or LinkedIn, right? So usually we recommend you maybe run for, you know, each one to run for a couple of months, ideally, right? This way they look better. If it's with a real company, with a real client, it will actually look great on your resume and LinkedIn, et cetera, and you will stand out. That's why we do what we do at BeginX, also in the program, right? Because we give you that real experience you can put in your LinkedIn and resume, et cetera, because I strongly believe that, I mean, that just makes you stand out right away, right? Compared to all the other folks entering the field who have hypothetical projects. Yeah, Sinran, I want to let you provide more insights if you have any additional insights on this. You see the question and the Q&A as well, right?
I'm trying to find
it should be at the top. If you sort everything by most upvotes, it should be at the top.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I think that's why it's important to back to my comment around this kind of first project, second project, third project. The first one being the most important, the second one being not as important, the third one being the least important. The reason I identify that is because I can use my personal example. So I spent a lot of time on my first project. And after a few months, I realized that actually I cannot use that one. So at one point I have to remove that from my portfolio website. After a few months, I realized that the second project that I spent a lot of time on, I couldn't use it anymore because I have better projects. So at one point I have to remove it from my portfolio website. So that learning taught me that we have to be very consciously pick a project that can last you a little bit longer than just a few months, and use your time wisely. So that's why, remember that I was saying for the second project, you don't have to focus on every single part of the design equally well. I'd rather just focus on something like a specific area. I know this is controversial, but again, my strategy always been try not to spread yourself too thin. If you wanted to have, let's say you spend time on a few projects with equally amount of energy on every single area, chances are you're gonna remove one of the project from your portfolio website at one point. So just a call out to say that, you know, if you see a project has limited potential, for example, it does not have a business constraint, it does not have a technical constraint, it's just a conceptual personal project, then that project does not have a high potential in the long run. So chances are when you get a better project, you may eventually remove that project from your portfolio website at one point. If that's the case, then I would channel my energy in the in a very specific area that can help me shine for that conceptual project. Like for example, I may work on a very nice prototype to show a blue sky idea, and I make that really well, as opposed to I try to make user research, prototyping, lo-fi wireframe, trying to get everything to a nice place, because eventually you may want it to deprioritize on your portfolio site anyway. So just try to use your time wisely. I don't know if I get my point across enough, but just knowing that they are not all case studies are weighed equally, are created equal.
Thank you, Simran. And I think everyone has this question for you now, the follow-up, or like a lot of people, the follow-up question for you. Why weren't you able to use them? Why did you have to remove those case studies?
Yeah. Also controversial opinion, or maybe it's not controversial. I just being self-conscious.
Just curious. Yeah. Don't worry about too much detail. Just see. I'm just curious. And I think lots of probably others have the same question.
So there's a bucket. Is it a bucket theory, or I forgot the official name of the theory? Is that, let's say if this is made by wood, right? The wood basket. If there is a shorter piece of the basket, then the water will flow from that piece. I can give you another example. If you have 3 great case studies on your portfolio website, no, I think 2 great case studies and 1 case study which is not very good, then I may not suggest you to put the not very good one. So in other words, I try not to expose my weakest project after I get enough experience. So like for example, at one point I realized that my first case study, which is a TripAdvisor redesign, I don't want it to show that. Why? Because I have better projects to show. If I were to include that project, it will pull my other projects down, if you get what I mean. Because I can give you another example. Later in my interview process, after I gain 1 or 2 years experience as a product designer, during an interview, they ask me why you presented a project that is not shipped. And it was very hard for me to answer because I only had 2 projects shipped at that point, even though I had 1 year of experience. But I choose to show a project that is not shipped because I think that project, has something interesting to say. But they question me. So why you wanted to show that project? And I didn't know how to answer it. So my takeaway is that if you wanted to position yourself competitive as a designer, you may want to shoot a higher bar, that you try to shoot the mid-level designer range as opposed to the entry-level designer range. Meaning that you don't want to show work that can expose yourself as a very early stage designer with a redesign type of project. So you try to shoot a higher bar, like you wanted to brand yourself as a mid-level designer who have dealt with several complex projects. So that's why you may not want to include project in your portfolio that is too, you already moved on from that stage. So that's why I wouldn't show it. However, I know the reality is that I don't have that many projects to show in the first place, so I have to include that. Fine. But at one point in your career, you may realize that you move past that stage, that you may wanted to remove it, or only show the best of that project as opposed to everything.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Sinan. So I want to ask you another question, then come back to Farah's question in Q&A. In your opinion, what's the one, maybe two top things that make a UX portfolio effective, right? That employers really like, in your opinion? I know you already touched and kind of went on this from different angles, mistakes, secrets, but anything else you want to add in terms of like top one or two things that make an effective UX portfolio that employers love?
I think nowadays there are a lot of like storytelling tips. There are a lot of good website templates, to the point that hiring manager, especially the good hiring managers, can directly cut to the chase to look at your final design and tell how good you are in design. It's just because of over the past like 10 years, people already build this kind of sensitivity of identifying good designer. And I know it can be controversial because, again, UX is not just about UI, but given the bar has been raised higher and higher, if you have a great, well-crafted, hi-fi, high fidelity final design with great visual hierarchy, with industry standard design components, showing that you know how interaction design components work, showing that you have the knowledge of design system, then you can be noticed by or acknowledged by the hiring manager at a quick glance. It's not that hard. So they can identify. I know it sounds like very abstract, but if you talk with a experienced designer, hiring manager with a good caliber, she or he would be able to tell that pretty quickly, cutting to the chase, ignoring all the text that you write, but to the design that you created, to tell how good you are as a designer and how much they want to interview you.
Thank you, Sinan. So coming back to Q&A here. So Farah has a question, since we talked about these the real client projects. Where should one look to participate in projects that are ideal for portfolio and real life business metrics if the person does not have prior experience?
There are many places that you can do there are institutions, organizations such as BeginnerX who can support you on that. You can also go to Hackathon, partner up with an engineer, because as I mentioned, real world projects are all about constraints. When hiring manager try to hire you, they want someone who can start up, who can, get going relatively quickly, especially given today's landscape. There are probably not a lot of time and budget allowing the company to train you for an extensive period of time. They want people can, with a relatively short period of onboarding, you can get to produce high quality design that can be potentially shipped or launched without a lot of difficulties, right? That's the harsh reality of a market where are sort of saturated with a lot of good designers. Hope I didn't get sidetracked again, Michael.
No, I think it's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Also to add to that, there are many different platforms where you could find companies and organizations to volunteer for. Like Catch a Fire is one of them that I'm familiar with. There is Tech Fleet as well, but I've heard that sometimes there can be lots of applicants for each project. What else? You could also, one idea that I really like is just volunteering, like approaching different accelerators or incubators or startups and just offering to volunteer. You have to be a little bit more entrepreneurial. You have to be able to persuade them and to basically sell your services, because even if you offer to volunteer, if it's like, startup with smart folks who are building it and, don't have a lot of time and are very busy, you have to be able to persuade them that you will actually provide value. Right. So, but it's usually a great idea. Lots of companies, lots of startups are open to it. Absolutely. So just finding accelerators, incubators like that, and just pitching to them the value that you will provide and volunteering. Again, I'm in favor of when you don't have any experience to just volunteer first and then to look for paid work after, because typically that will take much less time, right? That will get you to a goal faster, because one mistake that people make is just having hypothetical projects and then just applying because they only want to get paid work. And that's great, ideally, in an ideal world. The problem is you might just apply for like a year or two and then still not get anywhere, right? It makes more sense to use that time wisely and build yourself up in the process and build that real experience, maybe along the way. I'm not saying like go and work 100 hours for them. No, just do like some part-time work while you're doing your other stuff, while you're working maybe at your day job or whatever, right? So you have to be manageable. And that helps. And of course, I mean, we're biased, right? But you could also apply to our program, right? We basically help you get real clients, real projects, along with mentorship and career prep, and basically push you all the way to an actual job with a guarantee, right? So it's that's definitely another option if you want to do this faster and in a more clear and structured way without wasting a lot of time.
Michael, can I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think very good point. But also wanted to call some alternative routes, just for food for thought. It's also an option if you wanted to co-fund, act as the co-founder of a project, if you have resources or connections who have complementary skills with you. For example, someone who is a aspiring product manager, or someone who is a software engineer. You can always partner up to solve a problem that you have. So you act as a co-founder of something. And I think companies also appreciate this kind of entrepreneurial mindset, and something that you can consider, because if you are a co-founder, you have some flexibility of the things that you wanted to do, as opposed to volunteer for a company and all they will ask you to do is to redesigning a button, which you cannot really use it in a portfolio, right? You can maybe spend half a year, but they ask you to do some very tedious things. So that's an option for you as well. And as I mentioned, it's all about finding these constraints. You can work with engineers on something like a hackathon. You can work with your like other people as a co-founder, or you can reach out to your network or your secondary network that if someone, a co-founder, is looking for help. And the good things about that is because you're a connection of them. So you can be more specific to say, I wanted to use it as my future project. Can I work on more like this area rather than a stranger co-founder who may ask you to do an illustration of a homepage?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point, Simran. Thank you for adding that. That's yeah, also what I wanted to add to. Definitely ensure when you find some work, like when you do either you, like Simran suggested, you could even try to be like that co-founder of a company potentially, or maybe do pro bono, volunteer work or whatever. Make sure we have like a whole training on this as well, video. Make sure the work is beneficial for you, right? Don't just do whatever, right? Because it's much better to do some pro bono work than do like a low paid internship where they just give you, ask you to make copies and basically do this like low level work that doesn't really result in any case studies or a great portfolio, etc. Because when you volunteer, when you do pro bono work, don't just volunteer for whatever, right? Make sure it's beneficial. Well, of course, it has to be beneficial for them, right? For them to be able to want to do it. But make sure it's beneficial for you, right? So make sure the project is sizable. Kind of just going back to those points that I mentioned earlier, that the project is sizable, that it's something interesting and challenging, right? Because if they pay you, they completely control what you do. If you're volunteering, you have much more control and say, usually, right? At least you can have much more of it in shaping the project, which is very important. So you get a better case study. And again, like Simran said, you don't just like design one tiny little button and that's it, right? So important point. So Simran, what I also wanted to ask you is, why is it important to research others' portfolios before creating yours? Do you think it is important?
I think it's important, but be very careful about what portfolio you use as inspiration. I think it's very important. It's like when we were in a college, right? Your inspiration determine how high you can reach. So like let's say if you are you're doing research of some not so good portfolios, then chances are your portfolio will be around that range as well, maybe a little bit better than what they are, or maybe about the same. So I think that is important. And I know it can be tricky. So you can, if you're not sure, you can always get some guidance from some experienced designers that you trust to give you some guidance about, what would be a better reference. And in terms of research, it is helpful, but also you wanted to stay away from it, to look at it as with a distance. It's not about. So my suggestion, maybe it's easier for you, is to only choose the best of the best. Maybe just like a few portfolios. I think that's enough, as opposed to looking at 30 portfolios and try to be the average of them, right? I think that can help you more focused. And then at one point, you realize that you wanted to move on to add your personal stuff. So you don't stay among them. You want it to be different. So you can use that research as starting point, but pick it off from there as you gain more experience.
Thank you, Simran. So we'll have to be wrapping up soon, but I do want to take like a few more questions quickly before we start to wrap up, because we don't have lots of time left. So Annalise, I'm sorry if I mispronounce anyone's name, by the way, obviously not intentional. Is asking, can you please talk about presenting a portfolio during an interview and how this differs to a case study? So I know, again, this can be another topic in itself as well, presenting portfolios during an interview. I assume, Annalise, you're asking how this differs from just a case study walkthrough, or did you understand the question? Maybe Sindran, you got a better grasp of it.
I think so. I think that's the a very important delineation I wanted to draw. But in a nutshell,
She's clarifying, Sindran, what are hiring managers looking for during a portfolio presentation? Yeah, thank you, Annalise.
okay. Yeah, I think what the hiring manager look for the presentation is more about the design intentionality. It's hard to tell that from your portfolio. Just simply looking at a portfolio, it's hard to tell. You know, from your portfolio, they can tell you have good craft, visual craft, and that's probably enough for them to call you to get to the next round. But for the next round, it's really about a round of filtering candidates to hear more about the story behind the design if you are intentional about your design choices. Because you can copy paste, you can copy a master designer's user interface, but you have to articulate your design decisions. I think that's something that a hiring manager wanting to see if you have this awareness and intentionality behind your design.
Thank you, Sindran. Let's see what else I want to focus on, like the most important questions that everyone has usually. Again, please try to upvote others' questions, review others' questions, upvote them so we know which ones are you guys are most interested in. Sindran, let's say, like, besides what we already discussed, what do you think in terms of what types of projects are usually most effective in one's portfolio and why?
I think in portfolios, what type of project? I think certain level, because when they look at the portfolio website, they don't have a lot of context. Like when they look at portfolio website, there's no enough time for them to read all the text, or probably they don't even want to read through all the text about those kind of things. So they judge things often on a face value, right? Like you can tell immediately, let's say if I'm designing a homepage of a restaurant, for example, on the face level, on the very face level, it's not very complex. There's not a lot of complexity around interaction design or even visual design. So right off the bat, no matter how much text, how much story you tell behind the design, it's just not complex enough to be a compelling work to pitch to the hiring managers, especially if other people have more complex or interesting work. So I think that is something I wanted to call out. So there's certain type of projects have intrinsic complexity. For example, software as a service, SaaS product, right? You have to deal with dashboard, which is in itself, it requires more knowledge of hardcore user experience, UX knowledge, right? You have to balance all the kind of like data table, that kind of nature. So so that's something that I try to suggest is not too simple. Sometimes there's product that are too simple. But I agree, it's oftentimes that you don't have a choice. Those are all the projects you have. So there's not a lot of choice here for you to choose which one to put on.
And just a quick follow-up on that. I know we already touched on this before, but anything else you want to add in terms of why, again, do you think it's important to have those real client case studies in your portfolio, not just hypothetical student projects? Any additional differences that you maybe can highlight?
Great question. From the portfolio stage, when people look at portfolio, it's not very easy to tell those constraints. It's hard to tell. So chances are you have a great looking portfolio and they call you for the second round of interview where you get to present it to your hiring manager, right? Because if you wanted to eventually get an offer, you have to pass that round as well. But the thing is that if you don't have those constraints, it's very hard for you to justify the design decision. Or you can say whatever you want, but if people ask you like, why you design things this way, have you considered that? And why you choose this over that? You have to say something. You can always say, I talk with users. Like, yes, that's definitely something that you can talk about, but it's not strong enough. Like if you can say something like, talk with the users, but also this is the business goal. So I have to find a balance, right? I have to find a balance. I have to find a trade-off. So I could have used this, but I choose this instead because of the trade-off. So that's become a much stronger argument. You can also touch upon the technical constraints, like this is my concept, my design. However, the engineers push back or there's no enough engineering resource around this project. So I have to make a trade-off to tweak the design, knowing the fact that it might not be the ideal user experience. But they wanted to ship it in a week. So I have to work around it. That's why at this point, if your project has those kind of constraints, it makes your life much easier to get through the next stage of interviews.
Thank you, Sinran. So this is great. And by the way, I also want to quickly highlight to all the folks in the audience, right? So if right now you feel like we really have missed something that you really wanted to know about, that you have like this burning question that you must get answered, that you really hope to get answered to during this event, right in the Q&A. So make sure we see it. So we see it all the way at the bottom here. So we want to make sure that if there are any questions like that anyone has, that we address them. And I know, so just quickly answer Shahira's question. So Shahira, I think we covered this earlier. Maybe I missed it, but how do you volunteer your UX services? So basically, what we discussed, right, the platforms that we discussed, like Catch a Fire and other ones, to ensure we get to others' questions. So we just discussed it. And we also posted, so take a look in the chat. So Mika posted a whole event we did specifically about building case studies and how to get those case studies and how to build experience, etc. So definitely highly recommend for you to take a look at that whole virtual event recording. You'll find a ton of useful tips. We actually have a couple of them. I think the link is the one with UX manager from Google, who we had on. We also have a similar event with a panel as well of our alumni and other professionals. All right, so I don't see any additional questions, but I do see quite a few questions still here. All right, so I think we took Annalise's question. All right, awesome. So I think Shahira has another question here. Anything else, Sinran, you want to add to this? So Shahira is asking, as somebody who is trying to break into the field, what can I do to keep my portfolio up to date and marketable? Anything else you want to add besides what we already discussed?
I can add on to one thing. It's about this notion of familiarity, because we talk about the needs of hiring manager. One of the needs is that they wanted to hire someone who can actually do the job soon, like as soon as possible after they hire you, with a short period of onboarding, ideally, right? So that if you have work that is directly related to the company's product, that is always a good thing. So like, for example, earlier there was a question about, I only have 2 case studies, what should I do? I do have friends who are transitioning into UX who only have, I think 2 or 1, just with 2 case studies on her portfolio, but managed to get 10 interviews from great companies, just because of the work she did was around, I think, AR. I could be wrong, or VR, but very specific type of project, and that did attract the attention of many companies who are looking for those kind of expertise. So I wanted to say that, if you happen to have an opportunity to work on a relatively niched product, it can be compelling to those type of companies. Like, let's say if you have a SaaS product as one of the case studies, you may be more compelling to those kind of SaaS companies. And also, I try not to be too niched either, because if you design something, a type of product that people find it very hard to resonate with, is also hard for you to pitch to the hiring manager. Like if you're designing let's say this, right? It's okay, but in terms of, well, this is actual physical product design, but I was trying to use an example. Something is too niched, like a certain type of device. It's just a bit tricky because it's hard for you to present. You can have a great design, but it's hard to resonate with most of the hiring managers.
Thank you,
So
Simran. Yeah, that's great. So I think I identified, so after Annalise answered my question about burning additional questions, and what is awesome, I think Shandani has pretty much the same questions. So I'm just going to read both of them, and then we can briefly take that, and then maybe take one more question quickly, and then wrap up. So Shandani was first asking, what if we do not have any numbers or change to show in the case study? What if the work is done, but due to budget or other reasons, the designs are not shipped yet? And Annalise kind of highlighted the similar question. What if we do not have any stats to show in your case study? What if the project is done, but due to budget or other reasons, the designs are not shipped yet? How do you present these in your case studies? Are these good case studies to present in an interview?
Yeah, I can always double check the question to see if any nuanced details, but it's a great question, by the way. If there's no numbers to show, you can, but due to budget, other ways. So I think basically two questions that are related. I can speak to the second one first. Due to budget or other reasons, the designs are not shipped. It's okay. It's not a big problem, because it's not uncommon. So for designers with more years of experience, they may choose not to present that work unless there are something really compelling to say. But for people who want to transition into UX, you don't have a lot of choices. So you can still present it, but add a positive spin to it. Like, for example, the designs are not shipped, but those are the metrics that I would pay attention if the designs were shipped, to use that to inform my design iterations. Like, for example, although the design is not shipped because of budget, but we did learn certain things. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Takeaways, right? You can present that. You can present reflections. Although the design is not shipped, but those are things that I learned. I think those are things that I could have done better. And lastly, is what I said earlier about what I would do as the next steps. So, if for the future launch, what I would do is that I would pay attention to those metrics and collaborate with the product manager to monitor them. So for example, if the contact rates goes up, then it indicates that the design is successful. If the contact rates goes down, it means that what I would do is probably I would revisit this specific area with more user research or user testing to further validate my hypothesis. So those kind of things it demonstrate your strong awareness as a more mature product designer, as opposed to saying that, oh, it's not shipped. That's it. That's end of story. So I'm trying to add a positive spin to it regarding any numbers to show in the case study. If you don't have number to show, you can always say qualitative impact as opposed to quantitative impact. Qualitative impact includes things like quotes from customers. Like Michael used this app and he was really pleased because before he was like this, and then he mentioned like, it was great, it's very easy to use. Even things of that, it doesn't carry a lot of weight, but it's meaningful because when you are presenting impact, you are not just solely relying on one quantitative data or one qualitative data. You're trying to give them different perspectives to help demonstrate that your design has value. So I think all those kind of things count, even if you don't have a number to show.
Thank you, Sinran. This was awesome. So just very quickly, I know, and I think we'll cover pretty much all the questions. Related questions, very briefly. Let's do like this rapid fire type of answer, and then we'll wrap up. So Eric is asking, is it a good idea to add these personal projects as freelance, quote unquote, experience on my resume if it's the main experience I have?
I wouldn't do that. It depends on how you frame it, but I think from my standpoint, I would say something more like, I would rather say something like founder of a certain idea if you can push it far enough, as opposed to you do it as a freelance experience because you're technically not working for a company.
Yeah. Basically, don't. I mean, you can position it in the best light possible without obviously lying, right? So it's essentially freelance is usually when you work with someone, right? So you're not, if you're just doing a personal project, it's not freelancing. Unless, I think Zinran, you mentioned a good point, if you basically kind of like start your own company but as you said, you need to be able to push that and prove that, right? So it's not just like a hobby that you did, but you were actually trying to build a company out of it, right? And that involves a lot of things. And if you're just starting out to do that, I would rather recommend just finding a company and volunteering or like doing pro bono work or partnering with someone, right? Because that way you can also show that you actually worked with someone, you worked with a client, you worked with those constraints, and that's very important. And it's also probably a little easier than doing like the whole thing on your own. Last question. Very simple, I think, but it can have a pretty long answer. So I know Shahir, you set the record, I think, a number of questions here, which is great. You have any tips or resources for keeping up to date on current UX UI trends? What are your favorite ones, Simran?
That's a great question.
If anything comes to mind right away, I mean, while you're thinking, I would mention Jacob Nielsen's newsletter and just Nielsen Norman in general. Well, Sindron is sending a newsletter, right? Has a lot of talks about AI plus UX. What else?
Yeah, I talk about AI and design, so it's pretty up to date that I have to catch up like every week about new things. Regarding other kind of UX UI trends, and to be honest, many years ago I followed like Nielsen Norman group, but I found things start to change a little bit for the recent trends. You can go to LinkedIn and follow some seasoned designers, and you get a sense of what they're talking about. what they're talking about, something new coming out of config conference, or they're talking about some recent trends, or even go to social media like Twitter, Threads, sorry, X or Threads. People like to talk about trendy things over there. So it's not as like academic as the Nielsen Norman group, but still cover things that are trendy.
Yeah, there's also, and there are quite a few like there are influencers and there are also like thought leaders. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. Or sometimes somebody is popular, but that doesn't mean they're like one of the foundational people in the field or something like that. I would also recommend maybe Jared Spool as well. So he is pretty well known. He's like one of the basically initial thought leaders who we had on recently, not recently, but like a few months ago. And you can actually find the video as well. Maybe uxdesign.cc blog / UX Collective, UX Planet blog. You can also, I'll tell you about that. I'll tell you about the program, and I'll tell you about the newsletter that we run as well. So you can find some articles there as well as events. All right, so I know we're a little bit past the time, a couple of minutes, so let's wrap it up. So Sinran, thank you so much. This was awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed the event, got some great insights. As promised, right? So people ask about our program all the time. So again, as promised earlier in the beginning of the event, let me also quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build a very strong real client portfolio and real work experience, but also get the crucial soft skills like team collaboration, client management, and presentation, along with career prep to master UX job search and interviewing, so you can actually land a UX role. Who the program is best fit for? The program is the best fit for ambitious people who know UX basics or are willing to learn those independently, or come from a design, research, creative, tech-related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective and efficient ways, and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments. We're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. So what's BeginX? It's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into UX. We're in many cohorts and helped about 160 people or so transition into the field so far. Alumni of the program have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, ABC News, Meta, JP Morgan, many others. The program was ranked by SwitchUp as a best UX program and also featured in Fortune magazine and ADP list. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, Amex, The Economist, many others. What you gain after completing the program is build not just the hard skills, but the critical softer skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and master UX job search and interviewing, so you can land an actual job. In fact, our grads have done so well that we offer a money-back guarantee. So you either land a UX job or you get your tuition back plus an extra $500 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more at beginx.com. You'll see that in the chat. The next cohort starts we don't have the exact date yet, but basically relatively soon, in about a month or two, roughly. We'll update the date soon, but our cohorts are quite small and do fill up quickly. So please act soon if you feel like it's a fit. Also, to thank everyone in our community who attended this event, you'll be eligible for a $500 tuition credit if accepted. To claim that credit, what you need to do is by tomorrow, go to the website. You'll see the link in the chat again, and request a free no commitment career transition consultation, or you can also get program info or just apply. And by the way, our consultations are designed to not just be some like quick program pitch, right? But provide you an actual opportunity to learn about UX career transition best practices and pitfalls to avoid, get guidance and personalized advice, and ask questions about your own UX career switch and how the program can help, and see if it may be a good fit, if you may be a good fit for the program, right? In addition to telling you about the program, I also wanted to briefly mention that we frequently run different types of virtual events. So we'll keep you updated about the upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every few weeks or so. If everything is good, we're on track. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our wonderful guest speaker, Sinran, for taking the time to join us and provide all the valuable insights, right? So it was a huge pleasure to have you on. And by the way, Sinran, what is the best way for folks who want to connect with you or get in touch with you or learn more about your courses or what you're offering?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. The best way to connect with me is through LinkedIn, where I'm pretty active. So if you wanted to ask any questions, feel free to reach out to me over there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you at the next event.